All right, my next guest is Vandersteel, co-founder of American Made Foundation, the former president and co-host of Your Voice, America. Are judges wrongfully abusing their power to control the presidency? It seems like Ann was listening to the top of the program today. The answer, of course, is yes, they are. And Chuck Schumer told us it's all by design now, didn't he? Ann, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much, Steve. Good to be with you this morning. Yeah, we have to really rein in this judicial tyranny. Let's stop and talk about our history, that thing called the Constitution.
Yeah.
Apparently, they don't believe in that anymore, Steve.
Well, they don't care much about it. In fact, these federal district judges were, in fact, if you will, local judges. They're not supposed to have the power to shut down something nationwide or direct the executive to hire people he doesn't want to hire or turn planes around or do anything like that when we're trying to get rid of terrorists. These federal district judges are completely off the leash, and we need to correct that, Ann.
We absolutely do. I think we need to kind of go back in time and reflect on what President Trump just did by abolishing the Department of Education, because, frankly, they decided to erase our history. Let's look back at history. Why did the Brits leave and come to America? They were done without the no taxation, without representation. But more importantly, the royals used judges to implement the will of the king so as not to provide justice for the people. And we now know, if you spend a little bit of time looking at the Federalist Papers, specifically number 78, that they believed, and it was written, that the legislative and executive branches are actually more powerful than the judicial branches because the legislature holds the power to abolish the courts altogether and their structure, indicating that Congress holds more power than the judiciary, and at least in terms of institutional authority. And it was, again, codified by Marbury versus Madison, which our own bar card mafia really has sort of expanded with their own latitude on their interpretation of that. But I believe it's time we rein it all back in, and we can, because we actually have the power to do so, coming out of the congressional legislative branch as well as the executive branch.
Here's the problem, Ann, that a lot of people are nervous about. John Roberts, that's one of them. Amy Coney Barrett, there's another one that is of concern, because when this gets to the Supreme Court, this is pretty cut and dried. The executive, the president has the right to run the executive branch of government without interference from a co-equal branch of government, and certainly from the underlings, because a federal district judge is basically an underling in the federal court system. They're not, they're not at the Court of Appeals. They're not in the, any of the big circuits. They're a local judge in San Francisco or wherever, and they're deciding American policy. And I think that Pete Hegseth was right to discuss the fact that they do not have the right to direct American military policy. They didn't have the right to direct American foreign policy. And yet, by extension, that's what's happening, Ann. And this needs to get put under control sooner as opposed to later, doesn't it?
100% has to be put under control. In fact, this is an argument that goes back into the 1800s, right? In the Judiciary Act of 1801, they actually abolished the newly created judgeships, effectively removing those midnight judges and restoring the previous court structure, which required justices to resume riding the circuit. It also asserted that Congress actually has the authority to restructure the judiciary. And again, this all led back to Marbury versus Madison in 1803. So again, the Supreme Court back then, under the Chief Justice John Marshall, history repeating itself. We need to be looking at the precedent that was set back there, which established that principle of judicial review, asserting the court's authority to strike down laws as unconstitutional. This is not what we see happening today at all, Steve. We see legislating coming from the bench with a bunch of corrupt circuit court judges that were installed by Biden, 250 of them, to basically rule against Trump, rule against the American people, rule against the mandate that was delivered back in November of 2024. Boasberg, Chutkan, Chang, and Reyes, these men and women are now challenging what, frankly, should be constitutional law. Article 4, Section 4 was very clear. We had an invasion at the border. Frankly, our governors didn't even stand up with Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3. They allowed the assault to continue. They did nothing to deport these people. But again, that has been trampled on because thanks to our Department of Education and the misprogramming and the bar card mafia. Law schools are telling these people coming out of grad law school, you don't have to regard the Constitution. It's all statutory and procedural law. We have to fix all of this. This is where the corruption lies. It's extremely systemic.
Right, it certainly is. And Chuck Schumer talking about it, but you're right, because you go into academia and they're teaching this, that you can ignore the Constitution, which clearly is false. But how do we accelerate to the Supreme Court? Now, I believe, I have my question about John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett and some others, but the fact of the matter is they almost certainly have to rule with the Constitution on this one even though I don't trust them in a lot of their decision-making processes, I don't think they have any choice here, Ann, but to go with the United States Constitution. I'll give you the last word.
I agree. They have no choice. Again, at this point, Americans are waking up to everything, to the corruption. Thank you, Elon Musk, for Doge and getting really people fired up about where the money's going. So you've got America on high alert at this point. They're paying attention to this, and they're starting to dig in to, thanks to artificial intelligence. Like it or not, it provides a lot of information for people. So yes, they're going to hold, the court of public opinion is going to hold the Supreme Court justices' feet to the fire, to the letter of the law of the Constitution. And if they don't, well, come what may, it is not going to be pretty. And I do believe, though, the Supreme Court will have to wise up and rule as the Constitution dictates.
Let me ask you one more thing. I changed my mind. One more thing. What about the impeachment of some of these judges has been suggested? I mean, it's completely legal, right?
Absolutely. It's completely legal for these judges to be impeached. They have warred against the Constitution, which is warring against we the people. Their job is to actually rule on the law, not to legislate from the bench, which in fact has been warring against we the people. Hence the reason Biden's appointee of these lawless political hacks called judges across these federal districts, it has to go. I think they should all be impeached and removed because, frankly, this is not. And the precedent was set again in 1802 to do just that.
And Vandersteel, co-founder of the American Made Foundation, former president, co-host of Your Voice America. You know, we've been pretty good on Voice of America. We could take that over for Carrie Lake and run that thing a little bit stronger, I think, Ann. Anyhow.
I think that would be a great idea, Steve.
Greatly appreciate you. Well, you know, we could do pro-America programming. Wouldn't that be something? Ann, thank you as always.
Wouldn't that be novel?
It would be nice, wouldn't it? All right, Ann Vandersteel here. Greatly enjoyed that. I'll take a break and be back. It's the Steve Gruber Show. Remember, X, Facebook, Instagram. Follow me on all of those places. We need to grow this movement for common sense conversations like the one you just heard. I'll be right back.